Welcome to the Pilgrims Grey Chronicles Podcast, folks. First one ever. I'm your host, Robert Clark, and this is going to be where ancient history and modern events collide here. The podcast is going to be more than just exploring the past. It's about connecting the dots between what happened in the ancient world and what we see unfolding right now. The same beings that and forces that shape the antediluvian world are still very much around and active today. You can see it everywhere if you're paying attention. They influence everything from ideologies to technology and even the way we view reality itself. My goal here is going to be to uncover these patterns, expose the deceptions, and provide a clear picture of the spiritual battle that we're all really a part of, whether we realize it or not. Now, every Monday morning, hopefully including tomorrow, if everything goes well, this is the first podcast, and I'm going to be expecting issues to occur here and there, including, getting microphone balances correct. I feel like my microphone might be a little too hot. So I'm going to kind of tap it down just a bit to get rid of some of those S's. But anyway, so every morning, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, just so you know, we're going to be diving into topics like the Seed War, the fallen sons of God, ancient technologies. I know everybody's fascinated by Tartaria, and I've got some tonight before I go to bed and after recording this podcast. I've got to address some nasty little comments on my YouTube channel. I say nasty, but everybody has a different opinion, right? And, not everybody is 100% necessarily correct about everything, and so I'm absolutely willing to hear what other people have to say about the subject. I've even told folks who've commented on my Tartarian YouTube video, because I also run a site under You Will Know, limited liability company that promotes our band, and this podcast now. On that YouTube channel, I have a video there on Tartaria and what I believe it is and what I think it isn't. And anyway, I get good comments, I get bad comments. I like them both. The bad comments just help me to be a better thinker, more critical thinker, and I think that's important. We should all be willing to hear what people have to say. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree, and I promise you that tonight I am going to address the comments, and I'll do it politely. Anyway, and we're also going to be covering other things. It's not just Tartaria. It's everything to do with these beings that are still here, and it covers a lot of area. A lot. And, including hidden truths of history. Who doesn't want to know about that? If that weren't the case, Graham Hancock's 2 different specials wouldn't be so popular, right? Graham and I would probably disagree on what exactly these lost civilizations are. I don't subscribe to the ancient alien theory as far as them being from other planets necessarily, as far as the common thought on that goes. But we'll get into that. Got plenty of time for that. And then also, because this is an introductory podcast, the first one ever, I really just want to lay down the foundation for who we are, what we're doing, and when we're doing it. So again, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time every Monday, we'll be releasing a podcast. And also Friday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, I plan to release a much shorter, because these will be, every Monday the podcast is going to be, roughly an hour long, give or take. It could be 45 minutes, could be an hour and a half. And if things get crazy, if I happen to interview somebody, and it goes 2 hours, it goes 2 hours. But so Monday's the long form one. On Friday, I just plan to do the 3 top stories of the week that are related to the kind of subject material that we cover. Because I think it's really important that we cover areas that apply to today. even if it's, it might be a news story this week that's one of the top three I feel that are related to the subject. It may not necessarily be a current event. It could be something ancient, like, for instance, perhaps they discover something even more incredible at Göbekli Tepe, even though they've stopped the digging there. Maybe something comes up, and we need to cover that and how it impacts things for us today. Because what's the good of knowing the past if we can't utilize that information today to improve our lives, or prevent things, or take some sort of proactive measures to utilize that information? So, the bottom line with this podcast is, if you've ever felt like there's more to this world than what you've been told, then you're in the right place, because this is where we all just need to be uncovering the truth together, right? There's other podcasters out there. I was kind of inspired to go ahead and start doing a podcast, not only by my wife and others who gave me, what's the best way to put this? Constructive criticism on YouTube to stop using AI voices. And the only reason I do that, or have been doing it, is I work a regular job like many of you do. And I'm gone from home, over 60 hours a week, Tuesday through Friday. And so it gives me very little time to accomplish a whole lot. And so AI voicing, after typing and researching and getting all my work together, it was just so much easier to feed that into an AI voice and have the AI voice take over. And by the way, I haven't looked into this, but if somebody knows a way to stop Windows from interfering and popping up messages while I'm trying to do my podcast, feel free to share it, because like I said earlier, I don't know everything, but I do know that's annoying for probably you, the listener, and me as well. But anyway, I'd really like to awaken people and do it together, though. Like, I don't know everything. I feel like this is just something that needs to be shared with people, and not just simmering around in my brain. I don't want to just know things for the sake of knowing them. I want to know them and then help others to know about it, don't you? I mean, it doesn't mean you have to go out and start a podcast, but it does mean if you connect with this podcast, by all means, feel free to share it. I mean, of course, that's what makes these things successful. And in that way, we kind of work together, right? I know a lot of times we all like to complain about things, right? We're all like kings and queens of complaining. We all like to say, when somebody says, well, how's your day going? I can't complain. Right. We are all expert complainers. And so rather than just complaining about, oh my gosh, the world is crazy, it's like, the whole world is run by, demonic activity. Well, maybe it is. But let's talk about it and then figure out what we can do. And once we have this knowledge, let's not just let it sit around in our gray matter in our brain. Let's do something with it, right? And if that means something that you think is just simple, like sharing this podcast, that's important. That is way more important than you think it is, because when you do something like sharing this podcast or liking this or commenting on it or even anything along that nature, you may be thinking, well, what does that really do? Think about before the internet. Things had to spread by word of mouth. Well, now you can reach so many more people by word of mouth. You really are making a difference. If just 10 of you share the podcast or talk about the subjects that are talked about in this podcast and things like that, that's what makes the big difference. When enough people do that, instead of just sitting and absorbing information, that's what changes the world. So who are we, and why did we start this podcast? Well, let me start off with a quote. It comes from Proverbs 25:2. And it says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, to search out a matter is the glory of kings." Now, I've heard this verse used by somebody before, and I love it. It's kind of a personal mission as all of us, as seekers of hidden truth, right? Because so many people who walk around in this world with just nothing but what they see in front of them. It's kind of like the person on the interstate who's yelling at you and making all these hand gestures behind you when there's like 300,000 cars in front of you that nobody can get around. I mean, it's not you, you know. And so, truth is kind of like that too. You got to have some level of situational awareness, some level of, what's going on in the world. And you can't just look at headlines. In this day and age, so many people lie about everything. It's like you don't even know who to trust. We have black hats, white hats. Can we trust our 3-letter agencies? All of them, none of them. Can we trust the media? It doesn't seem so. I mean, who do we trust, right? So it's good to find people who don't let you down and are reliable sources, and people who are humble and aren't, just interested in, numbers or money or power and things of that nature. One of the reasons I'm doing this, yes, I would like to reach a larger audience, but not for any financial reason. I make plenty of money. It's mostly because I like sharing information with others to help them and to discover truths together so that, we are walking alert and awake, kind of like Nehemiah when he was building the wall. He was trying to warn everybody and they weren't listening. They're like, why are you building this stupid wall? You're retarded. We're perfectly safe. Everything's fine. And, of course, everything wasn't fine. And so it takes, people like ourselves who are paying attention to warn others with good information, good solid information. And that takes time and effort. That doesn't mean you just, see a headline or a clickbait type thing and think, oh my gosh, you need to dig farther beyond that and really get down to the root of it. And sometimes we'll dig and we'll still be, incorrect. I have people correct me all the time on my YouTube videos or whatever, or they, offer constructive criticism, and that's fine. Sometimes I just let it go. Sometimes there's been times where I said, you're right, maybe I should have included Atlantis also in my video, but sometimes you run out of time, right? It's not like I do this all day long, right? And so one of the things early on, before I even thought about doing any of this or discovering any of this unseen realm, as Michael Heiser, another famous truth seeker, so duly noted, is that there is a whole world out there that because a lot of my life, I didn't go too far beyond the headlines myself. And it took, some others waking me up. And part of my process was just, I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to do it my whole life because I'm fascinated by Tolkien. Even our band, I have a band, you may have noticed on YouTube or whatever, called Pilgrims Grey. Now, I didn't take it completely from Tolkien because, Gandalf was known to some in Middle-earth as the Grey Pilgrim. And the podcast kind of takes its name from a similar idea in that we should all be stewards of our own earth, like Gandalf was a steward of Middle-earth. But before I get to that, I don't want to get into the name of the podcast yet and why we came about it. I'm getting ahead of myself. I just wanted to mention that while studying for this book that I'm doing is a fantasy fiction influenced by Tolkien, but it has to do with the world before the flood. And so I have all these fictional characters doing all these, these things. It's kind of, I want to say it's kind of like historical fiction, but it's, because it does deal with the flood and some other things. But the main reason I mention this is because in my digging, because the best fiction, right, has elements of truth to it, and that's how you get absorbed into that world. You got to have good, strong character development, and good character development goes right along with the realm you're developing itself, right? Tolkien built a whole world around language and a history and developed histories behind the language and cultures and so on. And so I wanted to dig deep and find out about, the antediluvian world. And and so, boy, did I ever find out. Uh, I, I mean, I don't want to labor over all the different materials I've covered, but uh, I want to say I have an interview on YouTube where a gentleman who runs a podcast who influenced me to start this one and just do it, named George Hobbs, who runs both The Fact Hunter, which is a great, great podcast, and Flat Earth Files. And he's a fantastic guy, always very helpful, and he was very influential in me getting this started and using Spreaker as a foundation for it. But yeah, all these different guys I came across as I was studying. One of the first ones was a guy named Trey Smith, a quirky little guy, but absolutely blew my mind when I realized that, you know, giants. Well, I, it's like it's like we all knew it, like it was always there, but you don't realize just how much it's there until you really start looking under the cover. I mean, we all know about Goliath, and maybe even some of us knew about some of the other giants. That Goliath had brothers, but I have to be honest and say, 5 years ago, when I first started writing my book and researching all of this, I had no idea that entire warfares were fought in the Old Testament against tribes of giants. And I really went into detail with a couple of books by a gentleman by the name of Gary Wayne, who I would love to have on the podcast sometime and pick his brain apart. But I've read both of his books, and it's one of the things that inspired me to do this podcast, because like Gary would tell you, that what we have going on is uh, the outcome of the things that happened before the flood, even into this day and age, is still going on today. It's still going on. And so the thing is we really need to dig deep into these things. I began to notice patterns in ancient texts and modern events, and those kind of things led me to question the mainstream narrative of everything. And then, of course, we all know what 2020 brought us, and that just brought even more. You can't trust anything, so you have to do your own studying, right? Um, anyway, so not only did I look into the antediluvian world and for my book, and that's what got me on to all of these subjects, whether it's biblical or even the Sumerian myths and Enuma Elish, and um, it's amazing the things you learn about the Eastern cultures and India, and um, I guess we all, well, maybe not all of us, but many of us probably thought to ourselves that these were all just fantasy and myth and what have you, and I don't I don't think that anymore. I really believe, how can every culture on the planet write about the same things? I mean, it reminds me of that. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like there's that meme that goes around the internet where it talks about the different animals on the Chinese calendar, and they're all normal animals except for one, and it's a dragon. And it's like, and so it's like we can believe all the other ones, but for some reason, no, no, dragons didn't exist. I don't know what the Chinese were thinking. That's where they went into the realm of fantasy. Why? I don't know why we think that. But I mean, I'm guilty of it. But once you find out so much more information about this kind of stuff, you begin to realize that, when there's enough stories about this, it doesn't, it's no longer story and myth. Every culture, every culture has a story about the flood, but it didn't happen. I mean, to me, that's incredible to believe, and I don't believe anything that our current history people tell us about human history. It's clearly BS. There's absolutely no way human history is what they said it was. When we have things like Gobekli Tepe and things even older, where massive stones were carved, moved, set into place, lined up with constellations, lined up with the sunrise, all these different things. And then you discover that it was the temple portion of Göbekli Tepe that's built first, not like, they make it out to be, well, hunter-gatherers got together. No, they built the temple first, and then, their living quarters and other structures later. But these worship temples came first, folks. I find that highly, highly odd. I don't think it's so much odd anymore, but at the time I was like, what the heck, Anyway, so, all this questioning of mainstream narrative, and it also had me, especially with Gary Wayne, connecting the dots with biblical prophecy. And there's a lot of buzz out there, biblical prophecy, ancient history. A lot of interest in this is rising, especially when you've got platforms like YouTube and TikTok buzzing about topics like the Nephilim, UFOs, and all the suppressed knowledge. I mean, some of it, it's BS. Like, I saw that recent debate where the Emerald tablets were brought up, and so far as I know, I did a video on it. Nobody's ever demonstrated they physically existed. We just have an obscure translation from one person who said they existed, and they translated it. And anyway, I mean, it's questionable at best. But not to 100% dismiss it. But I mean, we have to be somewhat rational, right? You can't just believe everything that comes along. So, what the name Pilgrims Grey represents? Well, let me again give you another quote from Scripture, Hebrews 13:14, which I feel like it aligns with the idea of being spiritual pilgrims on a journey, right? And so this verse says, "Here we do not have an enduring city, but we are looking for the city that is to come." And so the whole reason I chose that as a band name and for the name of this podcast is that in my thought process, I feel like we all kind of start off gray. And like C.S. Lewis said, everybody you meet on this planet is a person that is either becoming more light or more dark. Every decision, every word they speak, every action they take is pushing them in one of two directions. And every way that you interact with somebody is doing the same thing. You're either influencing people towards more white or dark. And so that's kind of the idea behind Pilgrims Grey, but and that from kind of a more heavenly spiritual sense in my thought process. The second part of it is I want to separate myself as an observer away from the white and black checkerboard of this world that I believe the rebellious angels of old mold everything into. It's, they like the yin and yang balance, the good cop, bad cop, but ultimately they're all still on the same side. Sort of like, our government, we have left versus right, but really they're both wings on the same corrupt bird. Yeah, more than ever, I believe it's just one uniparty. They want money, they launder it. You could probably count on one hand, is my guess, the people in office that are not compromised either through immorality or maybe to their credit. They're only compromised because they're afraid that deep state folks would kill their family, that kind of a thing. So that's sort of my overarching idea. We're all wandering through this world together as pilgrims, gray at first, and then moving on to one side or the other. And I know gray normally reflects ambiguity of our journey, between the clarity of faith and the mystery of what's hidden, so to speak. But ultimately, your shade of gray is going to start growing in one direction or the other. And that's basically the gist behind it. It's nothing too complex, but I just thought it was an interesting take on things. And plus, I'm a big fan of Gandalf the Grey. He's great. And so this brings me to my initial idea of the seed war. So to me, the seed war, it starts with, I've done a couple of videos on YouTube, and I want to just use the Genesis 3:15 quote because it's kind of the primary foundation of it. And it says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. But there's so much more. I mean, that kind of encapsulates it, but it's so expandable because, you have parallels in other mythologies, like Greek mythology, the Titans, the giants. They were said to be a rebellious race who fought against the gods. It's kind of a narrative that's mirrored in Genesis 6, but, not in the same way. It's more from a polytheistic viewpoint where they see the gods as, gods. And, from my perspective, a biblical perspective, I see them as rebellious angels who desire worship and got it from us, both in the antediluvian world and even today. So there's even a passage out of I can't remember the exact quote of it, but I know that it's in Jubilees, I think chapter 7 in the low 20s, maybe 21 through 24, that explains the corruption of humanity by the Watchers. And I think this is currently irrelevant because all of this seed war is tied to modern genetic modification and transhumanism. I mean, you look at people like Elon Musk or debates on CRISPR technology, and it's pretty clear we're playing God and probably got this technology just as the antediluvian humans received technology from rebellious angels. We're probably getting the same thing. And another thing this podcast aims to do, and I alluded to it earlier with the Unseen Realm and Michael Heiser, is, let's just put it this way. Another biblical quote, Ephesians 6:12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So if you want to know who's behind the leadership of this world that you never see, or if you saw, you probably wouldn't recognize them for not being human or whatnot, it's these principalities mentioned in Ephesians 6:12. I don't think they're just some necessarily invisible force. I think they can influence from the spiritual world and not be seen by the naked eye. But I also think they do take physical form in this world. Like the book of Hebrews says, we hear about the book of Hebrews and maybe just think of it in terms of, oh, this stranger came out of nowhere and lifted the car off my baby and then disappeared. But if angels can appear that way and appear to Abraham before they went to go destroy Lot, why can't rebellious angels also appear and, you would not know that they weren't human because they appear to be human? So, we know that the gods of the nations were real, and the biblical writers also knew it, and they weren't figments of the imagination. They were supernatural beings, and they could take physical form in this world. I can think of some examples from history where spiritual forces seem to be at play, like with the rise of Nazi occultism and their movement, which I think is still ongoing to this day, or the influence of spiritualist groups on modern global leaders. It's still happening. You may not hear about it, but if you dig, you'll see that it's still happening. And you look at the UFO phenomenon as possible modern day watchers that existed before the antediluvian world. That's what I think they are. And then you think of looking at whistleblowers like David Grush in 2023. These people, many of them might think that they're alien beings from other planets, but I don't think they are. And I don't think I'm wrong about that. Even people who aren't Christian in the Department of Defense have mentioned that they feel these things are lying, deceiving, interdimensional spiritual travelers. And so it's not just Christians noticing this, like myself. And I mean, in all honesty, not all Christians agree either. Some Christians would vehemently disagree with my opinion on this. And that's okay. It's okay to have disagreements. It's no big deal. So one of the things I did in all of this is I try to look at what all influences the entire seed war and what's going on from way back in, the pre-flood world, all the way back to Adam and Eve, all the way to modern times. And one of the things I came across, and I know this is controversial, but I bring it up only because it is important. And I know many of you will be like, oh my gosh, you're totally discrediting yourself for bringing up this subject because you have to be retarded to even think it. But just hear me out on this, because there's more to this than you think, and it's not as easy to dismiss as you think it is when you dig into the flat earth perspective on ancient cosmology. In Judges 5:20, it says, the stars in the sky fought against Sisera. I think that's interesting because it's analogous to angels and stars. And it suggests that stars may be active sentient beings, which is consistent with a very popular book in this generation, the Book of Enoch. I think it's really important that we pay attention to such things. You don't have to necessarily agree with it, but you should be knowledgeable about it. There's plenty of good books out there that take the Book of the Watchers and the Book of the Parables, which I think should probably never been taken out. The Eastern Orthodox churches didn't take it out. As far as I know, it's in their canonical Bible of this day. And I think it bears examining and should be examined. It doesn't mean that you are listening to heresy. There's good reason to read the first book of Enoch, not the least of which is, it seems to me, from my studies of it, that it's the primary way that Jesus referred to himself in the New Testament. And he wouldn't have got that anywhere I can think of. And I know the first thing somebody's thinking right now, well, the book of Daniel mentions it and Ezekiel mentions it. Yeah, that's true. It does. But Ezekiel mentions it as an angel referring to Ezekiel as a son of man, right? And in the book of Daniel, it's not really referring to it says one like a son of man coming on the clouds and so on and so forth. And it's not really referring to Son of Man as a title like the Christ, because Jesus should, his first and last name isn't Jesus Christ. Christ obviously is a title, the Christ. And in the same way, the Son of Man, as far as Jesus' use of it, is a title. He is the Son of Man. And the interesting thing is he didn't have to explain that to any of his followers. They were familiar with Enoch, the book of Enoch. It was one of the most copied books found by, I think, the second most copied one by the Essenes in those caves, the Qumran caves. And so, obviously, Jesus was familiar with it because he used that title, and there are quotes in the New Testament that almost quote Enoch verbatim when dealing with future and also dealing with the sins of the angels and what they had done and why they were being punished for it. And even our imagery, modern day imagery of hell and in the New Testament, it's nowhere really to be found in the Old Testament except for Enoch, a place described with fire and some other things. So it is very interesting. And like I said, you don't have to believe like I do about it, but you probably should at least check it out if you're interested, because it is an important book that needs to be looked at. And then I think of other historical cosmologies that deal with this flat Earth perspective. I know probably people don't want me to mention, but we have Babylonian star charts that describe the heavens as a dome. The flat Earth perspective believes there is a firmament. At least that's one of the more common thoughts. I know not everybody agrees in flat Earth about a dome. Some think there could be planes flat plains that stretch on for, potential eternity. But then you also have ancient maps like the Mercator projection, and it depicts a central landmass like Mount Meru or Eden. And then even a reference in the book of Enoch, 18:14, where it says, "And I saw the storerooms of all the winds, and I saw how with them he has adorned all creation and the firm foundations of the earth." Now, why does that even matter? Well, one of the more popular searches out there, if you pay attention to, search engine optimization, a very common thing looked up is firmament evidence and flat Earth, and people want to know about it. And the reason it's important in regards to the seed war is because it is foundational for deceit. Right about the same time, and I have a video about this in my YouTube channel, but right about the same time, in the mid to late 1800s, several factors came together. The taking over of local education into federal education through the Rockefellers. And then we had several other things foisted upon us. The taking over of the medical industry through basically, the Rockefellers and plastics and oil and petroleum. And their money and power was used to influence things in such a way that if you didn't do it, you didn't get the money. They got their strings attached or their little claws into everything. And then, the things that people are just now beginning to turn back to, like cures from nature, were seen as quackery and witch doctory. When really, frankly, some of them work. I mean, you would never know it, but, just sunlight and eating dandelions. Yes, the weed that grows in your yards is incredibly good for you. You can eat a dandelion salad, and it is incredibly good for you. I didn't know that. I mean, I was one of those people putting, the cancerous causing weed killer stuff on it until, the last few years. So, definitely not trying to make you feel stupid if we're doing the same things, because, I'm right there with you. I'm learning all these things too. I'm just sharing what I know now. And I came from a place of headline news and ignorance, just like everybody else. And I'm learning and I'm sharing, and that's all I'm doing. And the reason I think that the flat Earth is important is because right around that same time, heliocentrism began to take fruit, and so did evolution, so did occultism, Aleister Crowley, Madame Blavatsky, a couple others. I can't think of their names right offhand at the moment, but Bailey. I think her last name's Bailey, but it might be Alicia Bailey, or anyway. They all promoted an environment of deceit to get you to no longer think about God. And Blavatsky promoted an ideology that basically continues to this day. It says we were basically placed here by beings from other worlds, planets, and so on. And kind of like the movie Prometheus, the prequel to the Alien movies. And so it makes you feel like you're a speck that happened by accident. Evolution, a globe, a massive universe. And don't get me wrong, I believe those things too. I mean, we're brainwashed into it, right? I mean, once that started to take off in the early 40s and 50s, you begin to see a globe in every single TV show on TV at the time. It appeared everywhere. And it's just amazing how they do it. You don't even realize you're being brainwashed until you just don't question anything anymore. And anybody who does question it, you call them retarded. That's when you know you've been brainwashed. So when you hear flat Earth, and the first thing you think is, oh my gosh, what retard believes that? Well, do we believe in scientism or science? Because scientism would tell you that don't question anything. Science proves everything. But that's not science. Science should question everything. We should be able to ask questions, including of things we think are settled, right? And so that's why you have this going on. And I will sometimes bring it up. I don't harp on it, but it is important because it's part of a great deception. Because if, as many of us believe in the Christian community, and I'm a pre-tribulation pre whatever. I know that'll make, I'm sure somebody's gasping even now and rolling their eyes and typing me a hate-filled message that, it's pre-wrath. There is no rapture. There's a fantasy. It's, all these different things. We're in the little season. The millennial reign's already happened. It was Tartaria. Like, I get all that, and I've argued against all that, and you're welcome to comment, and I will tell you my opinion in response. But the thing about it is I believe an upcoming deception is coming. Just like, if you've ever heard of him, L.A. Marzulli. He has this really great quote, and one of our songs on our album is kind of taken from that, where he says, when we go up, they come down. And that's what I think is coming. I think this whole situation with the New Age movement and vibration will be just dismissed as a low vibration thing when these supposed alleged aliens from another world stop by for a visit, and will be explained away. Nobody will even think of a rapture, because we got all these different people that either are preterists who believe that everything up to Revelation has already happened in AD 70. Anyway, I guess, I just don't even know. I just don't even know what to say about all that, to be honest, other than just to let you know, I'm not going to harp on the flat earth thing. I might bring it up occasionally when it is important or some new discoveries come out on it. And if you want to ask me about it, that's great. I happen to believe that biblical cosmology is probably a better way to put it, and I believe in it because I've examined many, many different lines of evidence, and there are just too many questions that go unanswered. And a globe doesn't solve it. And in fact, it creates far more issues when you look into it deeply. And so part of this whole journey is we have a band, Pilgrims Grey. I've been mentioning it lately. Our album is finally, for the love of God, been completed. Is very difficult to get musicians to get together and do their parts and to put everything together. And I don't know, there's a lot more to it than people think. Anyway, I can see why a band like Tool takes 13 years to complete an album. It's a challenge. I guess, some people are great. They just go into a garage, record, boom, they're done. But I didn't have that luxury. Anyway, bottom line is it's done. And the reason I mention it is because many of our subject material on the album is storytelling. The whole album goes together. It's a concept album, and it basically talks about these subjects that we're talking about. And if you're interested in these subjects, you're probably going to at least like the lyrics and the story. You might not like the heavier music. Excuse me, my voice is going. But it's there. It's heavier rock stuff. Our newest album is called 11 Z's. And each track on it is exploring basically a chapter in the spiritual narrative, like the first song, The Veil in the Valley of the Shadow of Death, where you're basically taking on through this journey by the central character in the album called the Grey Wanderer. And he is basically telling what he's seeing from the past all the way to present behind the protective veil that separates our perceptions. And I think it kind of works both ways. We can't perceive the spirit worlds visible to our perception from our eyes, but I think to some degree we're invisible to them sometimes, or at least to some of them. They don't all have perfect perception from their realm either. We have, something protecting us from such lawlessness. And I think certain things make it easier to see us, like fear, which is why they love, the emotion of fear, I think, kind of makes us like we've just turned a light on in a dark room, and they're drawn to it like parasites. And so they feed off it. And just things like that. I mean, we'll go into more detail later, but just know that it's, I think you'll like the music if you like that kind of, storytelling. And I really think, music is important and can be used for good or evil. It's just a thing, you know. And what I mean by a thing is, um, I hate to get into this because so many people think that you're a new age nut job when you bring things up like this. But look, the Lord is light, and He spoke existence into the world. So there has to be something to light and vibration, right? I think sometimes I think of string theory and the vibrations and the creation of the world, and then in specifically regard to music, I think of like Gregorian chants, and or the belief that certain frequencies, like 432 hertz, so these things are sacred. And if you look at the how water reacts to sound and vibration, and some of the designs and in Windows back in the day, I don't think it's a coincidence. It's just really interesting. And anyway, if you want to listen to our album, it should be released over the next week. We've primarily done it as a digital release for now, but we're planning on adding things like a PDF digital download book where you can read things about each one of us and the instruments we play and what music equipment we use to do the album. And it'll contain the lyrics for all the songs and the story. There's a bit of story behind each song because I'm a writer, and so I wrote all the lyrics, and I've got a story behind each thing. So there's like two or three, I think two instrumentals on there, and I even have a story behind each of the instrumentals. So as you're listening to the instrumental, you can read the story behind it as the Gray Wanderer is seeing what he's seeing, and the music is kind of conveying what he's observing behind the scenes, like in the song in the valley of the shadow of death. That song, he is seeing the beings, rebellious sons of God, and so on, traveling from our world into this world and back again, and how they influence. And I think you'll find it interesting. And so, and we have multiple influences, and sometimes we sound like our influences, and sometimes we don't. Like I feel like Randy Rhoads from Ozzy Osbourne in the early '80s was one of my huge influences playing guitar. I guess I should have mentioned I'm the guitarist and backing vocals on some of the tracks, and I played many of the keyboards. It's nothing fancy because I cannot play piano with both hands. So everything I do is on a little mini Alesis Q25, and I have another full keyboard, but I suck at it. But I can come up with interesting riffs with one hand, and that's what you hear on the album. My brother plays a full piano piece called Resigned on it, and it's an interesting track because of where it's positioned. And I don't want to give too much away because I like for people to kind of put things together themselves when they're listening to an album. Like I want you to figure out why the song, the instrumental Resigned, is placed where it is, because every song on this album was placed specifically where it is to tell the story, and it flows. So even the weird fact that the last song, the 11th track on the album Elevensies, is called In the Beginning. So, and don't think that because there's so many 11s here that we are somehow occultic. We're all Christians. The only reason it's Elevensies is because we're Tolkien fans, and I was born on November 11th, and I just liked it. And anyway, has nothing to do with Masons or anything like that. Or I would have put a 3 on the front of the album cover instead of just a Roman numeral 11, right? If you know, you know, right? So, well, moving forward from here on out, this Friday, I will make sure that we release our 3 top stories of the week. And boy, there's plenty of them, right? I mean, did you hear about the plane being turned around in Colombia? And anyway, it's crazy times. And so there'll never be a shortage of top stories. And my 3 top might differ from others because I'm trying to relate this to a seed war, but you'll see. And hopefully you'll enjoy it. It'll be much shorter than these hour-plus long Monday things. But, if you want to listen to this podcast while you're drinking your morning coffee, brushing your teeth, getting ready for work, or just driving on your way to work, great. That's why I'm releasing it Monday at 8 o'clock Central Standard Time, so you can listen to it while you're driving to work. And we'll try to, faithfully release that every Monday. Unless, if you don't hear it next Monday, then something bad's happened. Because I plan to do everything in my power to make sure you guys get an episode every Monday. Anyway, to wrap this up, because it's getting close to an hour here, and I want to end with a song off our album. But I would like to quote Isaiah 43:19, who says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" And so I want that to inspire your curiosity for what's ahead with this podcast, right? What I plan to do is next Monday, because there's been so much interest lately in my Tartaria video, I feel like there was ground I didn't cover. Everything from somebody saying, well, you left out Atlantis, to you don't know what the hell you're talking about this subject or that subject. Well, I want to address some of that. And so next Monday, because this was our first podcast, this is just a foundational introduction, so you know what's going to be going on. I'll be possibly doing interviews in the future. If you'd like to be on the show, so drop me an email, and we'll look into doing some interviews. I don't know quite how to set that up perfectly yet. So whoever gets to be the first interview, may God be with you and myself, because we'll probably struggle through it, but that's okay. But anyway, next Monday we'll be going over Tartaria and answering some of those questions, and maybe going over some of the advanced technology they utilized. Because I believe, like I said in my past video, that Tartaria was just another rebellion of the fallen sons of God. It was not the millennial kingdom. And I'll explain why in our discussion. And in the Friday update, I wanted to mention, of the 3 stories, at least break down the latest on what's happening at CERN, if you're paying attention to that, and how that's going to connect in some ways to biblical prophecy. So with that in mind, whether we're discovering or discussing ancient technology being rediscovered, or Nephilim DNA and spiritual awakenings, if you're intrigued by any of these mysteries, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast, and join me every Monday morning. If you have a question or your own theory, please send it in. I love discussing such things. I love maybe something I haven't heard, or haven't investigated, or I haven't investigated enough, or any of that. And I'll be happy to feature it in an upcoming episode. And, we can look into it and learn from each other, right? I want to share truth, and I don't mind truth being shared right back at me. Even if we disagree, it'll still be iron sharpening iron, and we will figure it out, right? So with that, I am going to leave you with the, by the way, the intro that you heard going on at the very beginning, the music, is the song The Key off of our album, and I'm going to play you out with a song called In the Beginning. It's nice and mellow, so you don't have to cover your ears. It's just our singer Shay doing her own little solo thing with some ambient music in the background, and I added a little bit of acoustic towards the end to kind of fatten things up. And anyway, without further ado, I hope you guys have an awesome work week, and that you enjoy listening to this podcast, and that you will support it every Monday. Peace out.
In whispers of dawn, the breath of life came. 6 days of wonder, earth called by name. Mountains and rivers, stars set to dance in the hand of the Maker. the world's great expanse. Oh, the light of the first morn, so pure, so bright, all of creation bathed in his might. But shadows did stir where none should tread, a covenant broken, a darkness spread. The watchers descended from heavenly skies, hearts bound by lust, eyes full of lies. With sons of the earth they mingled their seed, and giants were born to consume and to lead. Oh, the earth groaned beneath their reign, flesh became corrupted, bound by chain. From light to dark, from life to pain, the beauty of Eden turned to stain. Angels wept, and the stars dimmed their light, as heaven watched the fall of night. What once was good lay broken and scarred, the price of rebellion, too deep, too hard. Oh, the lights of creation fading fast, the cries of the faithful, echoes of the past. But in the ashes a spark remains, the promise of hope through all the chains. In the beginning, it wasn't always this way, a world of light, now shadowed by decay. In the beginning, it wasn't always this way.